Thank everybody for coming tonight. I know it's very hot in this room, so hopefully the sun will start going down and it'll get a little bit cooler. Find a seat. Students who are going to be getting credit for this or whose professors want to make sure that you're here, please make sure that you do sign in on the sign-in sheet out there. We are very fortunate in the criminal justice program to have such an amazing advisory board. This is a group of men and women who have really achieved the heights in their career, and yet they come back to us every fall and meet with us and help us figure out what kind of courses we should offer, what we should be emphasizing, what they want to see in you as future graduates who are going to be going out in the field. They also do this for us every spring, which is to have what we mostly call a career-related event. But I think what we've learned over the years is the best way to have a career-related event is to talk about real cases as a way of getting an understanding for what the career in criminal justice has changed, what it's like now. We are very, very privileged today to have a group of people mostly from the Clarkstown Police Department, but also from the Rockland County District Attorney's Office, to talk about a recent case. And recent, what was it, the last couple of years, right? 2 years. That was solved in a very novel way, maybe not so novel, but in a way that's a little bit different than we traditionally think of when we think about solving cases in criminal justice. So I'm going to allow the Chief of Police, Michael Sullivan, Chief of Clarkstown Police, to introduce the panel. Then I'd like to introduce our advisory board members and anybody else who's here from the criminal justice system to stand up. And then, of course, our president, Dr. Fitzpatrick, is going to say a few words. And then we'll let the panel start. At the end of the panel, there'll be time for questions and answers, and also to have you guys meet all these amazing criminal justice professionals who are sitting here in this room. Something that I really, those of you who are my students know, I would have done anything to be able to meet people like this when I was an undergraduate in college. So there are refreshments, it's hot, there's a lot of water, but let me, without any further ado, ask Chief Sullivan to introduce his panel and to say something.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Thank you so much to St.Thomas Aquinas for allowing us to come here and share this case with you. I think you're going to find it very interesting. It was about 2 years ago, January 25th, 2014. I was around a young chief, new chief, and I got that call in the morning saying we had a murder happen in our town. It was Peggy Nadell, who was a very well-known person, rather wealthy. She lived in a affluent neighborhood, quiet neighborhood. She was a socialite, she was a political activist, everybody knew her. So when we found her that morning, it obviously generated a tremendous amount of interest, both from the public, the media, as well as the elected officials, that everybody knew her. Fortunately, we had a suspect, and I'm not going to get too into it because I want these gentlemen to do it, but we had a suspect right out of the box that made some potentially incriminating statements. It looked like she had motive and she had opportunity, and it looked pretty good. We had some of the best forensic people in the business, in my opinion, in Clarkstown. They were going in that house, they examined that crime scene for days, going over with a fine-tooth comb. And everybody's questioning me, what's going on with this case? Where are we going? And I said to everybody, I said, don't worry. Look at my boss. I said, don't worry. I was a little cocky. I said, we're going to have this in short order. We're going to wrap this up. We're going to have the rest on our hands. About 6 weeks later, Lieutenant Glenn Dietrich came into my office. He was in charge of the investigation, and he said, well, the forensics came back. I said, okay, good. He goes, no, there's not. There's nothing. No forensics came back. Not a drop of blood, not a fingerprint, not a DNA sample, not a follicle of hair, nothing. He also told me at the time, by the way, we intercepted a strange phone call that just doesn't fit what we were thinking about this whole theory of this investigation. It's an anomaly, but don't worry about it, we'll track it down. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, no evidence, anomalies, we can't have no evidence of anomalies, we can't have it. What's going on here? So I said, Glenn, where are we going with this? And Glenn, he was sitting in front of my desk, and he put his elbows on my desk, he leaned over, he looked me right in the eye, in a very no-nonsense tone, said, Chief, we're going to go wherever the evidence takes us. So they tracked down that anomaly, and it turned out to be not an anomaly. It turned out to be a pretty key piece of evidence, this phone call that they tracked. And all of a sudden, our nice, neat little wrapped-up package homicide investigation with a local suspect, nice forensic evidence, traditional model of policing, right, solving homicides, was gone. All of a sudden, we were on literally 180 degrees in a different direction. We had no evidence. We had suspects that we were developing. We were learning new names every day. We had suspects from California to Florida to Washington, D.C., international at one point. I mean, it was incredible. Every day it was something new. And it was a long and dark road, believe me. And we didn't know what we were going to find along the way. But I'll tell you one thing. I'm so glad we went down that road, because at the end of it, we found truth and justice. And that's what this job's all about. But get back to no evidence, we had no evidence. So what did we do? Our investigative team, they had to create a new style of investigating these types of crimes. And what they did was, and I'm not going to get to it, to what I want them to do, but seriously, what they did was they started tracking not people, but people's technology. And that's where the phone calls and everything else comes in. And we developed what's called a digital footprint. And that's how we track down these suspects. And believe me, it seems like, and when you look back, it was all logical, and everything went from A to B to C to D, and it was all going to work out. But you know what? We didn't know what we were getting into at the time. We didn't know if this was going to work, and we didn't know if this was going to be prosecutable when it came into this. This was a whole new style of investigation. So, gigantic team was involved in this too, by the way. It wasn't just Clarkstown. We had certainly Tom Zuckerby, our friends from the Rockland County District Attorney's office. We had the U.S. Marshals. We had the Washington, D.C. Metro Police. We had local police, FBI. We had local police departments from California, and Florida, and Maryland, and it was all over the place. But if you really want to know the nuts and bolts of this case, the people you want to talk to are sitting right up here. 4 people right up here. I'm going to introduce them to you right now. Right over here, on my right, that's Detective Lieutenant Glenn Dietrich. He's the commanding officer of our Detective Bureau, and he ran this entire investigation. Right next to him is Mr. Richard Moran, Rockland County Senior Assistant District Attorney. He worked with us throughout the case. He had the unenviable task of trying to present this thing to the court of law. Back here is Sergeant Steve Cole-Hatchard and Sergeant Earl Lorence. These are the two lead detectives in this case, the lead investigators in this case. And thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over to you.
I have a couple of other intros to do, and then we'll turn it over to thank you for that. So I hope you guys are tantalized now, right? This is a fascinating case. Will the members of our advisory board please stand up and identify themselves to everybody in the audience? So let's see, we have Sheriff Falco, we have Kathy Tower-Bernstein, Director of Probation, we have Anna Enright, who's the Regional Director for Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, DOCS. We have Chief Sullivan, who is the Chief of Police for Clarkstown. We have Kevin Hallinan, who is former NYPD and currently Chief of the Diamond
Terrorist Task Force.
What?
Terrorist Task Force.
Okay, Terrorist Task Force, sorry about that. Andrew Gordon from the DEA, he's a special agent in charge of the White Plains office. Sergeant Cole-Hatchard, who's one of our new members of the advisory board. We have, I'm assuming that's Tom Hallinan, whom I haven't even met yet, from the FBI. He's one of the new members of our advisory board. Chief Kevin Nolte from the Orangetown Police Department. Dr. Kevin Barrett, who's my counterpart. Actually, he's more than my counterpart. He's the chair of the Criminal Justice Department at Rockland Community College. We have Sydney Dresky back there, special agent for this Secret Service. She's very busy these days. Anybody else who's on our advisory board that I might be missing? Okay, and will other members of the criminal justice community stand up and just show your faces so our students can know who you are? If they, well, everybody knows the chief over there. And then lastly, not lastly, but we want to have our president say a few words to you before we get started with the festivities. So please, Dr. Fitzpatrick.
Happy to be here tonight. It's wonderful to have an educational program as wonderful as the criminal justice program here at St. Thomas College. And Dr. Shayet and Professor Promazel are integral in making our program a success. So a round of applause for them. I think the best education for our students has to do with their scholarship, their research, working in a mentor relationship with our faculty, and so importantly is the relationship with the local, state, and national community. And that's what we have. We're so grateful to our connection to Rockland Community College for your leadership in bringing your students to us. And I just want to thank you for being who you are, and every day putting your life on the line for us and for our future students. Thank you for picking such a great career and doing something so wonderful for society. I'm so proud of everybody in this room. Thank you very much.
All right, you guys can begin. I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. Again, thanks for having us down here. As the chief said, I am the detective lieutenant in charge of the Clarkstown Police Detective Bureau. Also in charge of our juvenile aid bureau and our street crime unit. And this is my 33 years with the Clarkstown Police. Steve, how many years? 34, 35 in law enforcement?
32 at Clarkstown.
And Earl. Both of these gentlemen were detectives the day that this happened. It was a Saturday morning. The way we operate in Clarkstown is that on the weekends, we have a detective on call. Earl was lucky enough to be the detective on call. Right? So he received the call once the patrol arrived on the scene and saw that it was in fact a homicide, not reported as a homicide, as you're going to see in a minute. Earl was the one that was called in. The reason I mentioned the Juvenile Aid Bureau and the Street Crime Unit is we used everybody. All right? There was probably at least 18 to 20 investigators, detectives working on this case. It was a 4-month investigation. And what's interesting for you young people, like the chief said, is everything had to do with social media, electronics, cell phone towers, you name it, that involved everything. Wires on the phones that we ended up getting later on in the case. No forensic evidence, meaning the basic things that you usually see in a crime scene, that the suspects leave behind. Nothing. Very well-planned homicide, by the way. We were very lucky that these gentlemen were able to latch on to what we call a burner phone, that the chief explained before. A lot of you probably know what a burner phone is. Phones you can't trace anywhere. We were lucky enough to be able to find that phone. And if we didn't find that phone, we would have had a tough time cracking this case. Go right back to Valley Cottage. For those of you, I know a lot of you come from all over the area, down in New York City, maybe in Jersey. Valley Cottage is one of our hamlets in the town of Clarkstown. All right, we cover about 40 square miles, and we have a number of hamlets that make up the town. This was over on Andover Road in Valley Cottage. Very nice upscale neighborhood that you're going to see. We have a slide of that as well. One of the things we had to fight right from the beginning, what the chief said, was the media and the people that actually lived there. They thought that there was a murderer running around in the neighborhood, as you can imagine. What happened? We knew early on, right away, that this was somebody that Peggy knew. And these guys are going to go through that. So we had to try to ease the panic in the community, trying to tell them that we know there's nobody out there running around trying to kill people. All right? That's easier said than done sometimes. When you get something like this in a neighborhood with very little crime in that area. I'm going to turn it over to Earl and Steve right now. They're a lot smarter than me. I got to run the investigation. I didn't get to investigate it. There's the brains of the outfit right there, so I'm going to turn it over to them. Guys?
Yeah, thank you. I guess we'll start with the victim. The way we've done this in the past, we have a bunch of slides. What we'd rather do is trigger your interest and interrupt us, throw questions out at us. We'll try to give you the whole thing in a nutshell, but there are so many tentacles to this case. You may say, well, what about this? Throw the question out to us. We don't really have a routine. We just kind of go back and forth a little bit, try to make it a little more interesting. But do not hesitate to just blurt out questions, interrupt us.
They said I spoke too much on the Dateline episode, so I'm going to let Steve do most of it.
They actually edited me out because I do speak too much. Talk a little bit about our suspect, 80-year-old Peggy Nadell, loved by the community, just very, very well known. She was very security conscious. She lived alone. Her husband had predeceased her. Always had the doors locked. She was financially secure. Everything was always neat and orderly. She had a calendar book that had her entire life in it, day by day. That will come down the road as being somewhat important to us. To our surprise, about a week or so into the investigation, we found out that she was worth a little over $4 million. She had been an executive with Xerox, had a lot of stock options and other savings. So She was worth a lot of money. We didn't know that at
She
first.
wasn't your typical 80-year-old woman. She was active every single day, went down to New York City 3 or 4 times a week to go to museums, took care of all of her doctor's appointments, her dentist appointments, paid all of her bills, paid other people's bills for them as well. So she wasn't really your typical 80-year-old woman. She was driving every day and very active within the community.
One other important point, she had just gotten a clean bill of health. Her doctor said, oh, she's going to be good for at least another 10 years. That becomes very important later on. The incident, you want to give them a quick update on the police slides?
Oh, yeah. For those of you who are interested in law enforcement, there are some slides here, a couple, that are graphic in nature. So if that upsets you, you're probably, number one, in the wrong line of business. Or going to go in the wrong line of business. But if that makes you uncomfortable in any way, please leave. There's only a couple of slides, but they are graphic.
This is our early on primary suspect. She's the one that found the body. This is the daughter. She's the one who called 911. We're going to play the 911 tape.
What's your address?
Oh my gosh, it's 44 Andover Road now, Johnny.
What's going on there?
I think my mother fell down the stairs and the knife and the stairs are down.
640, man, stop screaming. 644 Andover Road.
Andover Road.
Say that.
Andover Road.
Stay on the phone, I'm gonna give you to the police for an ambulance.
Oh my God.
Is she?
No.
Said she thinks her mother fell down the stairs with a knife in her hand and stabbed herself.
Okay, what's going on? It's 644.
Trying to reach her all morning. She thought she got a knife in her hand. I think she stabbed herself. Oh my God. I don't think she's gonna call me. Taking her back in. Oh my God.
Hey, let's move. We have the information. What's on
So
the
she's reporting that she thinks her mother stabbed herself.
Okay, is the knife still in her?
Yeah, I broke it
Do
off.
you think she did it by herself?
No, I think she's down. Please, hurry.
Okay, are you able to control the bleeding at all?
No, I think she's down.
Can you tell if she's breathing?
She doesn't look like it. She looks psychotic. Oh my God.
Can you put your ear next to her mouth?
I'm not on my I can't.
Okay, is anybody else in the house with you?
I'm by myself. She lives alone.
What's your name?
She's been asking me to go.
There, I'm not with us, 644. Okay, is there anything else you can try to do as Eugene? Or not?
I don't think she's giving me breathing.
Okay, you want, is she called to the touch?
She's called and she's trying to turn blue. Please hurry.
They're on their way to that.
Okay.
Forgive us for the audio clicking. That's not on the regular download, so I'm not sure exactly what the problem is. But you heard her say that she used a medical term. She used the word cyanotic. Now, if your mother's laying dead on the floor, or you think she might be dead, I don't know if that cyanotic would come into my mind, or would it come to my mind to actually pull the knife that's in the middle of her chest out, if you already know that she's dead. And that becomes crucial later when we show up, about 25 minutes later after that phone call.
When we rolled up on the scene, first thing she said to us as she was grabbing a brand new bottle of vodka out of the car was that her DNA is going to be on the knife. She pulled the knife out. We also found out later on that she was in some financial trouble, had a couple of mortgages, had to borrow money, and she hired a lawyer just a couple of days after this event occurred before we had a chance to talk to her. So we've got this woman telling us she pulled the knife out, her DNA's on the knife. She called this phone call in, and she's having some financial troubles.
So when you're investigating something of this nature, what do you think the first thing you look at when somebody's dead in somebody's family? You look at who's closest to them.
Right.
Generally, that's where you start, and you build out from there. So that's kind of where we were going with this as well. So we
Two
started
siblings.
close.
There's two siblings. The victim had her daughter here who lived about 10 miles away, and she also had a son that they talked, but not a lot, who lived in Miami, Florida.
Okay, this is what happened, so this is what the public, let me say something about what the chief and the lieutenant alluded to before. As investigators, it's important to focus on the crime, so we were very lucky in the fact that I personally didn't have any knowledge of the outside pressures that the chief and the lieutenant were experiencing from both the public and the press, because we were kind of shielded from that by them. So it allowed us to focus on what we should be focusing on, and that is the crime victim and what happened in the crime and trying to solve it. So we weren't aware, at least I wasn't, I can only speak for myself, weren't aware of the enormous pressure that they were under from the outside. So that allowed us to focus, and this was the news clip from that first day. Maybe. It's not playing.
All right, we'll go into the crime scene. Basically, we get a lot of pressure. Everyone said it was very obvious who did the murder, how come Clarkstown had dropped the ball and hadn't made any arrests. So now we'll go back into what I was talking about, just looking at the crime scene.
So these are the case facts, okay? We walked in, you can see the bottom of the stairs here. This is the bottom of the stairway. It was a center low colonial. So when you walk in her front door, she was basically right there to your left at the base of the stairwell, okay? And that's exactly as we found her and found the scene. As you can tell, the knife that was in her chest, that was pulled out by the person who called 911, her daughter Suzanne. She ended up pulling it out of her chest and throwing it on the ground. And that's exactly as we found it. She was also beaten. She was beaten with a couple of objects, but one mainly was like a statuette that was in the home. She had 7 or 8 large contusions on her head at the time. And she was also strangled. You can see the black and blue marks around her neck and her upper neck here. She was cut by whatever was trying to strangle her. She broke her hyoid bone, that bone right here. That was broken. That is the statuette that was used. It actually fits, that's a long screw that fits into a base that was in the dining room that the suspect pulled out of the base and then used to beat her in the head with it.
That's a statue.
And that's the statuette. It's about the size of a baseball.
Very heavy, solid. I remember the girl who called the daughter, who called in the 911 call, she thought her mother fell downstairs. There were, by the way, 3 distinct stab wounds. This is a brass ball that we later found out was just used, somebody threw it out. 1 or 2 suspects threw this at her. So as you'll see as it progresses what they did to her, that was a brass ball that was found in her. We had a lot of luck this day on a couple of fronts. We had a heavy snowstorm. And when the first responding officers got there, they were able to see that the snow was fresh and untouched all the way around the house, except where the officer made his initial inspection. So we were pretty comfortable that no doors or windows were broken. We inspected them as well, but we saw the fresh snow. And this is what we found at the front door. This is the front door that we entered into.
So this was huge, actually. The fact that it had snowed the day before, or a couple days before, leading up to the homicide, just goes to show that there was no other possible points of entry or exit from this home. So that was actually a big, big point going forward with this case. Additionally, this second piece was amazing, so it showed that nobody forced their way into the front door. That view on the left is from the inside of the home. She needs a key to put in the door to unlock the deadbolt to open the door. That's the view from the inside of the home. That second view on the right is the door jamb, and it shows that it's not shouldered or kicked in or anything else like that, okay? So we know that to open that door, for whoever came to the door, she had to actually put the key in and open the door for them.
That was our first clue that she may have known whoever it was that entered the house. Our second clue was this. This is the kitchen. 2 chairs facing each other, as if maybe somebody was talking to each other. And then we saw this disruption here, and also in that book, there was a piece of hair. Had nothing to do with the crime. But There's a piece of hair in the corner on the table.
So that looks like just anybody's normal kitchen table. But for this home, it was different because she was so meticulous and so neat that everything had a place and everything was in its place. And anything out of place was a red flag. And in this case, my house, there's all the tables, or all the chairs are pulled out. But in this woman's house, those two are out of place and that's a red flag. It looks like maybe she was talking to somebody that she knew. An additional factor that she knew who she had in her house.
And then there's a door over here, which leads to the living room, or the dining room, sorry. In the dining room, same thing. Everything was meticulous in its place. Two things in here. First, this chair was sitting just like this. Kind of led us to believe maybe there was somebody else in the house besides who it was that was in the kitchen. But also, you see up there, see that statue? That's where the other statue that was over on the floor came from. So now we've got two areas out of place and very distinct for this home.
This looked very early on from my first half hour on the scene inside that it was a staged burglary. And by that, you see the drawer gently pulled out, okay? When it's a normal burglary, people don't take care when they pull out drawers looking for valuable items. They throw things around, they ransack rooms looking for items to take. And they certainly don't leave valuable jewelry behind, as they did in this case. Right on top of that dresser, they left all those rings right there. But they took one item on the top. There was a large diamond, what turned out to be a fake 6-carat diamond ring on the top. They took the 6-carat diamond ring off, but left everything else. So that was a huge red flag as well. And it appeared to everybody there that it was a staged burglary.
Now, I had been outside with the suspect, and she had been babbling on about all kinds of things. And she said to me, you know, maybe this was a burglary. Now, she didn't know what Sergeant Lawrence was finding inside. Maybe this was a staged burglary. You should check and see if she named 3 things. My mother's big diamond ring, my mother's checkbook, and my mother's laptop. You should check and see if they're missing. I called it to Earl. I said, hey, Sarge, what's going on here? What's missing? One big diamond ring. There's a pocketbook down on the floor, but there's no checkbook, and there's a laptop missing from the office. Wow. She named all 3.
Red flag.
That's where the laptop was missing from. Like Detective Lieutenant Dietrich said, well, what we came up with after we had a week at the scene, we held this house for a week. We even cut up the living room floor, sent the entire floor to the lab. We came up with no fingerprints, no hair, saliva, semen, blood. We came up with absolutely nothing, except we did come up with the victim's DNA, so we know the process works. And we knew that the victim's granddaughter had visited from Florida in December. On the cables of the laptop, we know she was a user of a laptop. We got her DNA off the cables of the laptop. Nothing else. What we ended up doing with no evidence whatsoever, we had to go digital. Now, we had done a little bit of this, bits and pieces over the years, but this was really starting to look like a daunting task. We were going to have to go digital for everything. And our initial research found nothing on the victim's phone, cell phone, or home phone. The only thing we did find, which was a little suspicious to us, is the daughter, Suzanne, told us that she called many, many times that morning. When we pulled her phone records, we found that every single phone call lasted for about 2 or 3 seconds. Not even enough to make the phone ring at the other end. So we're wondering now, did she really try to call?
So right away, we started social media. Now, we don't do any investigation without turning to social media first. I know that I can speak for myself anyway, when I was a detective, that's what I went to for every single case I was involved with. And Facebook is not the only social media out there, as you all know. But most of the people's information that I found on this case, that we all found, was found on open source media within social media. Okay, so
we ultimately had a list of over 350 names of people, either suspects, witnesses, people who knew something, and a majority of them social media. And here's some of them, the players. top one is Suzanne. That's the one who called in the 911 calls that lives about 10 miles away. The next one is the son who lived in Florida, married, 2 children.
Bobby Scaccio is the son-in-law of the victim, the husband of Suzanne, and Diana Nadell is married to the brother Jim Nadell, and they live down in, or she lives down in Florida. Now, it should be said that right away we went to phone records, right away. So all of these people that are involved, that we say are involved in this came directly from people's phone records, okay? So they're calling certain people in and around the time of the crime, so we want to know who they are. So we go, we find out who they are, and these are the people that are involved, okay? It's in and around the time of the crime, and this particular person, Karen Ham Samuel, is a friend of Diana Nadell, lives down in Florida, very close by, talks to her daily. And the other one is Andrea Benson. She lives in Washington, D.C. She's actually a niece of Diana Nadell.
This is the big guy. This is Diana Nadell's first husband. Born, raised, lived in Jamaica, had a business importing stolen vehicles into Jamaica and then shipping them off to Japan. He was in the middle of building a house in Japan. As it turned out, Diana was having an affair with him during this whole time and prior to that. She went to Jamaica for 4 days in December to visit him and ended up staying with him. Jim Nadell didn't know any of this.
He actually did know it, and he's a strange bird. I'll say this, everybody involved in this case was strange. Really, really strange. And I use that term loosely because I like to say other terms, but really everybody in this case was, I think, a little bit out of it. So I don't know if he didn't, I don't think it was that he didn't know that she was there for 4 days by herself with the ex-husband, but I think it was more like he just didn't want to believe it.
Red flags. The whole 911 call that you heard. She knew exactly what was stolen from the house. This is Suzanne, her daughter. Said her mother fell on a knife. There were 3 holes in it. Said she pulled the knife out, so she didn't say I pulled the knife out and dropped it. She said my DNA is going to be on the knife. She repeatedly, at the scene, asked us if she needed a lawyer, and within about 72 hours, before we even had a chance to ask her if her mother was left-handed or right-handed, she hired a lawyer. And she also told us her mother was worth high 7 figures, and this wasn't how she wanted to get her money.
She seemed to be obsessed with the fact that her mother was loaded, rich. And it took us a couple of hours to convince her to come to this. Now, it was cold that day. It was January 25th. It was cold. It just snowed the night before. So she's standing at the end of the driveway, walking up and down the street, making a scene, basically. And it took us a couple of hours to even convince her, to see how to convince her to come back to the station where it's warm and so we can talk and get some background information. At the foot of the driveway is not the optimum time or location to get all this background information. She was very apprehensive to talk to us. That was, little did we know, that's kind of just her nature.
Now, we've had to hide a few slides because of time constraints, but there were a ton of other red flags with her. The one I love the most, she lived 10 miles from her mother. She shopped 20 times in the prior month at ShopRite in Airmont, near Suffolk, near where she lived. The day of the murder, the day before, the morning of, she shopped at the ShopRite in West Nyack. First time in 21 trips. And that day, we got the receipt for the trip. She bought rubber gloves and cleaning supplies. So, lots of red flags, a lot more than we can put on your screen.
So Diana Nadell, the daughter-in-law, she had a bunch of red flags as well. She had said that she was up in Washington, D.C. the night before the homicide for a family wedding. She was, at first contact and subsequent contact, she was very evasive about her exact whereabouts to supply us with who we could speak to about her location. So she was really unaccounted for a full 23 hours while she was in Washington, D.C. At the time of this homicide. She even lied about having an email address. She used it to actually correspond with her ex-husband. So we found that out much later. But just stuff like that she would lie about, like little things. Repeatedly tried to implicate Suzanne in the homicide. And claimed she didn't speak to Peggy the day before the homicide. She actually spoke to her 4 times. And that came out with phone records. I mean, that was easily verified. Steve had mentioned this earlier. She kept a notebook, a daily appointment book. Now, she was old-fashioned, as you can imagine. I know I still sometimes keep a book similar to this. I know a lot of people keep it on their phones now. She wasn't like that. She keeps it in a book. Okay? Every single day, she had something going on. Every single day. Monday, she went to the dentist. She actually got a tooth extracted on Monday, which becomes important later. Tuesday, she had a lunch date with a friend. Wednesday, she had a bunch of meetings. She had to pay her Optimum Online account. She went to the MMA, not the Mixed Martial Arts. That's the Modern Museum of Art in the city. She went there a few times a week. Same thing on Thursday. Friday, she had to pay a safety deposit box. She went to the Met again. Saturday, she had no activity. So what does that tell somebody that talks to her every day? She's going to be where?
Home.
Right.
As we started to go, we started to pull some warrants. I have to say the DA's office was extraordinary. During this case, we obtained 167 search warrants and subpoenas in a 4-month period. Incredible amount of work. One of the very first things we did is we pulled 2 search warrants for Suzanne's telephones. She had 2 work phones. We pulled it for both of her phones. We did it through our local justice court. We applied the 2 search warrants. We laid out the early pieces of this case and went upstairs and had one of the judges sign it. One of those judges had discussions with some of the other judges and said, oh yeah, by the way, a couple of Clarkstown guys were upstairs. They had us sign a warrant. And they just talked about what the case was all about. Judge Gerber wasn't the judge that signed the warrant, but he was a sitting active judge in Clarkstown. Turns out he was a lifelong friend of Susanna Nadell Scotchio. He worked with the victim, Peggy Nadell, on a bunch of Democratic campaigns. He was informed by Judge Thorson, who did sign the warrants, that there were 2 warrants at the very beginning of the investigation, which is not extraordinary. He assumed we were going to be upstairs a lot and talking amongst judges, not a big deal. However,
Now, it's really not a big deal for 2 judges to talk about what's the business of the day. That's not a problem whatsoever. Just like cops talk about their day with each other, it's not unusual for 2 judges to sit upstairs and talk about what they just did during their day. That is not a problem whatsoever. The problem comes in here.
so we had a little trouble with Suzanne getting her to talk to us. We invited her out for a cup of coffee. We figured we'd take her to a coffee house, we'd sit down and chat with her a little bit. We really just wanted to find out some basics about her mother first. She met us at the police station Tuesday morning, the Tuesday after the Saturday murder. And she came in and gave us hugs and kisses, and she was friendly as pie. And we started to talk to her, and her phone rang. And as she turned around, she says into her phone, what do you mean 2? They got 2 for the same thing? Oh, they got 2, 1 for each of them. The next thing you know, she breaks down screaming and crying, refused to talk to us, ran outside, never talked to us again, and hired an attorney. We pulled her phone records immediately and found that the phone call was from Judge Gerber, talking about, hey, they got 2 warrants for your phones.
He is an active, sitting judge in the town of Clarkstown, directly interfering with an ongoing homicide investigation within the town. Have you absorbed that?
Suzanne and her husband Robert both immediately hired attorneys, wouldn't even talk to us in the presence of their attorneys. They wouldn't even let them tell us about their mother's schedule, nothing. With their attorneys present.
Now, I don't think this is going to work. Unfortunately, I think the video was shot on these. I really wish it was, because this video basically goes on to say, that he's an active sitting judge. He's saying all nice things about the victim, and then he wouldn't know any he has no direct involvement with the investigation and doesn't know any of the details, which is a complete lie. This is the day before he called Suzanne.
I don't know if this is going to work either.
This is not going to work.
It ended up getting to the point where it was so disruptive to the investigation, we asked him to come in and speak with us. We brought him into an interview room, and he pretty much admitted that he disclosed it, didn't think it was a big deal. We have it on tape. It was forgotten to speak, whatever. I have to apologize, though. I don't think it's working.
Unfortunately, it's not working. So the video portion is not working, but if I could verbalize I don't call him Your Honor anymore. I don't even call him Judge. I call him Howard. His arrogance knows no end, okay? The way he spoke to Steve and I in that room was like he was talking to a child, or thought he was. So that was a big impediment in this investigation. It really basically stopped the flow of information from Suzanne from that moment on when he got involved. So for the next 3.5 months, pretty much, Suzanne was useless to us for information. Which you would think if somebody kills your mother, you're going to jump over people to talk to the cops to tell them what you know, what things happened, etc. It wasn't like that with this case at all.
All right, so now we'll give you a timeline of events, try to get it pressed here a little bit.
We have a question over here.
Yes, sir.
Did he ever get in trouble for that?
Good question.
We filed a grievance with the state. There was a process that took, how many months, Steve?
2 years? 2 years.
2 years, not months. 2 years, and it really got nowhere. We got something back from them saying that they're not going to take any action against them.
All of the people on the judicial panel are appointed by a politician.
Do you want to add something to that, Chief?
Nope.
For all of us.
We did have criminal charges drawn, but we made an educated
We
decision.
decided at that point that it might take away from the
focus
our
of
focus of our investigation and just bring a circus atmosphere into this investigation, so we decided not to charge him. If I had to do it all over again, I might have. Maybe. All right.
So, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. He was recently re-elected.
Unfortunately.
And we're not going to talk politics, so we aren't going to mention that he's now trying to run for county court.
You know who not to vote for.
So what we did, we ended up starting every single person we identified, we started pulling records. And records, as we called an unbelievable amount of phone records. One of the records we pulled happened to have been Peggy Nadell's home phone. I remember the day, this is the one of the two big breaks. Earl came running over to me and said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this." At 1:17, 3 minutes before Peggy's alarm went off, which we're talking about, a call came into her. It was an odd phone call. It came back to a phone that was called a track phone, a throwaway garbage phone that, generally speaking, you can't trace. We subpoenaed all the records for that track phone. It was used once, and that was to make this phone call. Never used before, never used again. And of course, we didn't have a phone. So what we did was we took all of those. This is a manual spreadsheet. We actually did, by manual spreadsheet, we've now since got some great technology, and we started tracking everything. All of Diana's calls to her friend Karen, all of the calls that were involved in this whole thing, including the call at 1:17 from somebody to Peggy Nadell's house, and then 3 minutes later, Peggy's alarm going off. We also pulled 3 minutes after that, the security company calling Peggy, and her getting on the phone and saying, "Oh, everything's okay, I set the alarm off myself." It's the last time her voice was heard alive.
That's the phone that was bought. We subsequently were able to trace where that phone was purchased, which is an actual, it's a huge deal. The actual store is a Family Dollar store down in Miami, Florida. So that was a nice aha moment also. There was about 3 aha moments: finding the phone number that called into Peggy, finding where this was purchased, and then later finding out how that track phone was activated, and Steve will talk about that.
Now, we have two little pieces starting to bring Diana up to our forefront. We've got Diana unaccounted for 23 hours, and this phone was purchased a mile from our house. But she is trying to say that Suzanne did it, so we're thinking, maybe she...
By the way, Steve, let me just mention too, I talked about the amount of people working on this case. A lot of moving parts, as you can see. There were fingers being pointed at everybody, including the guy that did the home improvements in Peggy's house. Peggy had a boyfriend or two boyfriends that she used to go out to dinner with, and it went on and on. So we had other detectives and investigators doing all this as these guys were concentrating on what they were doing. We had to put all these other fires out that people were bringing up. So it created a lot of man hours and a lot of time with a lot of people involved.
So this is part of that, one of those aha moments. After we traced the phone purchase down into Florida, the track phone purchase, we were able and got lucky that the store held on to the last 6 months of sales for that store. And they tracked back each sale of a track phone in that time frame. We had 9 sales in the last 6 months of track phones. So we went through each and every one of those 9 sales in the last 6 months, and this one stuck out to us. Remember, we had already pulled phone records, and we started to pull up pictures of people who were on those phone records. So that picture on the right there is her driver's license photo of Karen M. Samuel, and then we put that together with the video still from the Family Dollar where the track phone was purchased the day before Diana comes up to New York, and we had another aha moment.
And we had 131 phone contacts between Diana and Karen in the week or so leading up to and after the homicide. Should we talk about this part here, I guess? Go ahead. Track phones, it was a feat to find out where the track phone was purchased. Tracking anything more is really impossible. They're designed for miscreants. They're designed for bad people. Buy, use, and throw out. We got really lucky, and this was the third really big aha moment. We got hold of a guy named Winston down in Miami who was a big manager for track phone. And after a few attempts, they couldn't get any information for us. We started friendlying up to Winston. We developed a relationship with him. And ultimately, we bought him a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue and a PDA t-shirt when we visited Winston. What we got for it was something that was really extraordinary.
I was bought him 5 bottles of Johnny Walker.
What we ended up doing is this. We told him what the case was all about and how awful it was for the family. He ended up, it turns out TrackPhone's database was an old system called Act 4, which was housed in the Philippines at an offshore customer service center. He called there and said, listen, I'm one of the managers of the company that hired you. I need a username and password. I want to go into that system. And he went into that system and spent about 3 days searching. And he sent me a fax one day. And on that fax were thousands of numbers. And in yellow, he'd circled 9 numbers? 9 numbers, 10 numbers. It was the phone number that activated that track phone that she purchased. Not only was it the phone number that activated it, as you'll see from the maps, it was activated halfway between Washington, D.C. and Peggy Nadell's house, the night of the murder.
Now, this just didn't happen overnight. This took a few months for this to come out. Okay, so it took a long, in our view, a long time, but that's just the way it is. It doesn't happen like you see on TV, CSI Miami, where fingerprints, DNA comes back by the end of the show, and then all these phone records come back by the end of the next show, and then you have the person locked up and doing life sentences by the third show. This is a long process, and you have to stick with it. Go ahead.
Did you have to go to Warren to get the track phone information?
Yes. We did subpoenas and
We had a lot of trouble. Actually, at one point, we had to threaten the dollar store corporate headquarters with a negative advertising campaign. They wouldn't comply with our New York subpoena because they were based in South Carolina. And it was the threat of negative advertising by a police department in New York that actually made John do that. So it was a lot. There's a lot of tentacles. As I said, every slide you go on for an hour. There's so many different things. That's where the 167 subpoenas and warrants are. You have to get it forever.
So, like the lieutenant and the chief said, we had a lot of other agencies helping us. We had the the Washington Metro PD helping us, the airport police helping us, as well as many other agencies, FBI, etc. The U.S. Marshals was really a big focal point for us. They helped us out tremendously everywhere. One of those places was their connections was here at the Reagan National Airport. Okay? We were able to track Diana Nadell's movement from the time that she landed to the time that she got into that car. And she got into that car with a woman named Andrea Benson, who is her niece. Okay, she picked her up at the airport. There's a couple of backstories about who was going to pick her up at the airport, but it ended up being her niece, Andrea Benson, who she really doesn't know. So I think this might have been the first time that they actually ever met.
And this is the same Andrea Benson that activated the track from 24 hours from now.
So this is a day before the homicide at 9:33 in the morning. From that point on, she was evasive with us about where she was.